everyone, welcome back to the stream. I hope you had as lovely as a weekend as I had. Like, yesterday I went creeking for the first time since childhood, which sounds very boring, but when you get into it, it's quite lovely, actually. And had lunch with, or dinner with friends, some drinks, and today I've just been editing my poetry book and yeah, going from there. So I have had a lovely weekend, and I hope you guys have had a lovely weekend too. But we're not here to talk about my weekend. We are here to talk about Grant Morrison. He was part of the tie both this week and last week. So I figured, okay, the only reason I did not pick him last week was because I already know a good chunk about Grant Morrison, so I wanted to go with someone who I hadn't researched very much. That was Chris Claremont. But since you guys have tied yet again with Grant Morrison, I'm thinking, okay, you know what? He tied twice in a row. I guess by de facto, he wins this round. So today, we are going to cover Grant Morrison, and next week we are going to cover John Byrne. I hope you all are okay with that. So, not so much like reading articles today. We're going to cover his Wikipedia, but I did find a crap ton of videos about him, including this one, which you will see why I picked it in a minute, because I feel like it encapsulates all of his nuttiness. Like, let's get this out of the way. Grant Morrison is a nut. He is a very peculiar nut in his own way. That doesn't mean he's not a bad writer. That doesn't mean he's a bad writer. And, oh shit, fuck you, go away. That doesn't mean he's a bad writer. It just, he has a very interesting approach. Not just to writing, but life in general. He's a very, very, very odd being in comic books. And so, yeah, we will go ahead and start with this Wikipedia, and then we'll go from there. Because the craziness is going to reveal itself very early, so I promise I'm not hyping this up. He is a nut in his own way. Alright. So, from Wikipedia, Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison, MBE. What the hell is MBE? Oh, he's been knighted. That's right. Grant Morrison has been knighted. He is Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. So yes, he is Sir Morrison to you, plebs. Alright. Born January 31st, 1960, is a Scottish comic book writer, screenwriter, and producer. And I was absolutely flabbergasted when I first realized he was Scottish, because whenever I heard back when I was getting back into comic books, whenever I had Grant Morrison mentioned, he was like lumped in with a British invasion, so I thought he was English until I heard him speak for the first time, and it's like, oh my god, you're Scottish. Oh my goodness. That was a bit of a shock to the system for me, but yeah. Alright. And he is non-binary. Okay, the whole non-binary thing, it's weird because people have claimed that he's non-binary because of this one interview, but apparently he hasn't totally confirmed that he's non-binary. I'm just gonna keep going with he, because, well, he is a he. And, to be quite frank, going off of his work and just his life in general, nothing about it screams really non-binary. It just screams very eccentric man. And yes, men can be eccentric. So, let's go on. Alright. Their work is known for its nonlinear narratives, humanist philosophy, and counterculture leanings. Morrison has written exclusively for the American comic book publisher DC Comics, penning lengthy runs on Animal Man, Doom Patrol, JLA, Action Comics, and Green Lantern, as well as graphic novels, Arkham Asylum, which he made a shit ton of money from, JLA Earth 2, and Wonder Woman Earth 1, which he got some flack for reasons we will explore later. The miniseries Seven Soldiers and Multiversity. The miniseries DC 1 Million and Final Crisis, both of which served as centerpieces for the eponymous company-wide crossover storylines and maxi-series All-Star Superman, which is a very good book. You guys should go check that out. Morrison's best-known DC work is the 7-year Batman storyline, which starred the Batman ongoing series and continued through Final Crisis, Batman and Robin, Batman: The Return of Bruce Wayne, and 2 volumes of Batman Incorporated. They are co-created. They also co-created the DC character Damian Wayne. This is why I hate those alternative pronouns, because it's very confusing. Alright. Morrison's creator-owned work, the bulk of which was published through DC Comics' Vertigo imprint, includes Flex Mentallo and Meet We 3 with Scottish artist Frank Quitely. And Flex Mentallo has its own controversies. It has been red-taped for a little while because the Atlas company, for like the old Atlas ads of buy the Atlas books to increase your strength and muscles, they did not take too kindly to Flex Mentallo, so they tried to sue the shit out of Morrison, and it kiboshed the printing of the comic books for a little while. And that's why if you go on eBay and you search Flex Mentallo, the single issues are worth a crap ton. Don't believe me? Okay, that I believe is the hardcover. Hardcover again, which is $32. Alright, let's look for the single issues. Alright, so that one is like $5, but $17 for the deluxe issue, $33 for, but still, it's like not super hoop-duper-de-duper expensive, but it's also like hard to justify the price for it. And if you could tell by the cover work, yes, it is definitely taking some shots at the comic book industry at the time. Alright. Where were we? Sea Guy with artist Cameron Stewart. What was Sea Guy? Okay. The Invisibles, which that is a can of worms in and of itself. At Morrison wrote a 3-year run on New X-Men and created Marvel Boy for publishers Marvel Knights imprint. Between 2016 and 2018, Morrison served as the editor-in-chief of the Heavy Metal magazine. Morrison's work has drawn critical acclaim. They have won numerous awards, including Eisner, Harvey, Inkpot Awards. In 2012, Morrison was appointed member of the Order of the British Empire, that's where the MBE title comes from, for services to film and literature. Alright, so his writer, notable works: Zenith, Animal Man, Doom Patrol, Arkham Asylum, The Invisibles, Flex Mentallo, JLA, New X-Men, The Filth, which I've heard is also very strange, Sea Guy, We Three, Seven Soldiers, All-Star Superman, 52, Batman R.I.P., Final Crisis, Batman and Robin, Batman Incorporated, Action Comics, and Multiversity. And he definitely has many more credits outside of that. It's just some of them are slightly more controversial than the politically correct would like to know about. I know that just because of Sebastian O. Alright. Alright, go away. I'm gonna take a little sippy sip of my Elvis juice. It just now hit me. I am discussing a Scottish comic book writer, and I am now drinking a Scottish beer because Brewdog is a Scottish beer brand. And so, yeah, this is actually perfect theming right now. Alright. Early life. Grant Morrison was born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1960. They were educated at Allen Glen School, where their first portfolio of art was rejected by their creator, guidance counselor, who encouraged them to work in a bank. Their first published works were Gideon Stargrave strips in Near Myths. Who is Gideon Stargrave? Comic character... Oh yeah, created by Grant Morrison. Okay. Their work appeared in 4 of 5 issues of Near Myths, and they were suitably encouraged to find more comic work. This included a weekly comic strip, Captain Clyde, an unemployed superhero based in Glasgow, for the Govan Press, a local newspaper, plus various issues of DC Thomas's Starblazer, the science fiction counterpart to that company's Commando title. Alright, so career. Here we go. 1980s. Morrison spent much of the early 1980s touring and recording with their band, The Mixers, occasionally writing Starblazer for DC Thomas and contributing to various UK indie titles. In 1982, Morris submitted a proposal involving the Justice League of America and Jack Kirby's New Gods entitled Second Coming to DC Comics, but it was not commissioned. And if I remember, there was one documentary I watched, he did try to be an artist for a little while, and then he got, like, eviscerated by the critics. He got eviscerated by the editors being like, yeah, no, you are no artist, boy. And so he stopped being an artist. Okay, where were we? After writing The Liberators for Deskin's Warrior in 1985, Morrison started work for Marvel UK the following year. There they wrote comic strips for Doctor Who magazine, the final one a collaboration with a then-teenage Brian Hitch, as well as a run on the Zoid strips in Spider-Man and Zoids. In 1986, also saw publication of Morrison's first of several 2 or 3 page Future Shocks in 2000 AD. I am severely contemplating doing a video just about 2000 AD, because they are an incredible influence on especially the Vertigo alumni. So, let me know if you guys want a video about them. Alright. Morrison's first continuing serial began in 2000 AD in 1987 when they and Stephen Yoel, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, created Zenith. Morrison's work on Zenith brought them the attention of DC Comics, who asked Morrison to work for them. They accepted Morrison's proposal for Animal Man, a little-known character in DC's past, whose most notable recent appearance was a cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths miniseries. Well, does that make him important, though? Okay. The Crisis on Infinite Earths storyline, I still like it, and I appreciate the art. I appreciate the fact that they tried to make all of their continuities into one thing, but it is a hot mess in its own right. The more I look back at it, the more I'm like, yeah, it is a hot mess in its own right. And just because you were cameoed in that series, that does not necessarily mean anything, because they were just cameoing all of the DC characters to pull them into one universe, and it doesn't mean that that character had really anything to do with anything. Like Amethyst at one point, like the character, like Amethyst. Alright. Let me pull her up so you guys know what I'm talking about. Alright, Amethyst. There we go. So Amethyst was a comic book series. Holy shit, her comics are worth a shit ton now. But, yeah, she appeared in Crisis on Infinite Earth, and she got blinded in that storyline, if I remember correctly. But it's like, how many of you guys actually remember Amethyst? Like, really? How many of you guys actually remember her? But anyway, my point goes to, with Animal Man, it's like, yeah, that was Grant Morrison's debut, and the character did great notoriety because of Grant Morrison, but saying that, oh, he appeared in Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's like, that's actually not as big of a, like, thing as you think it is when it comes to this specific limited series. Alright. And for a 48-page Batman one-shot that would eventually become Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. That was his moneymaker. Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, that was his moneymaker. That was the money shot that got him into comic books. And even he himself admitted that... Hold on. Even he himself admitted that a good chunk of that was because by the time that comic book came out, that was when the Michael Keaton movie came out, and a lot of people were just going to the comic book stores, and they picked up his comic book, and that's how he made his millions. So, yeah. He just was a very, very, very lucky Scottish bloke at the very, very right time. Alright. Owlman put Morrison in line with the British invasion of American comics, along with such writers as Neil Gaiman, Peter Milligan, Jimmy Delano, and Alan Moore, who I think Alan Moore should be scooched up a lot more on that list, considering that he's basically the one that started the British invasion, but whatever. Who launched the invasion with his work on Swamp Thing. After impressing with Animal Man, Morrison was asked to take over Doom Patrol, starting their surreal take on the superhero genre with issue number 19 in 1989. Morrison's Doom Patrol introduced concepts such as deitism and the writings of Jorge Luis Borges into first several issues. DC published Arkham Asylum on Serious Earth in 1989 with a 128-page graphic novel painted by Dave McKean, who, from what I have heard, was not very happy with that project. Comics historian Destin O'Neill's... Jesus. I need to go to sleep. Alright. Comics historian Les Daniels observed in 1995 that Arkham Asylum was an unprecedented success, selling 1,082,166 copies in hardcover and another 85,447 in paperback. While working for DC Comics in America, Morrison kept contributing to British indie titles such as Sergeant Smith's Day for Titans Comics, starring Sweetest Day, anti-Margaret Thatcher themes proved controversial, provoking a small tabloid press reaction and a complaint from Conservative members of Parliament, Teddy Taylor. The controversy... Yay! We're getting to it! Yay! Alright, the controversy continued with the publication of The New Adventures of Hitler in Scottish Music and Lifestyle magazine Cut in 1989 due to its use of Adolf Hitler as the lead character. Okay, so remember when I said that the controversy would spike up when it came to Sebastian O? Okay, when I was way back in the day, I did an article about Sebastian O and another Grant Morrison title, and I did some research about him and the artist, and this was what came up. Yes. The New Adventures of Hitler. Written by Grant Morrison and drawn by Steve Yeowell, who also illustrated Sebastian O, if I remember correctly. Alright, hold on. So it's... Yep. Collaborated on Sebastian O. There we go. Yep. Grant Morrison, your great progressive icon, made this shit. It is so out there, and it is super edgy, and I think this is just Grant Morrison's like shitlordiness coming to light here. So I'm not taking it seriously at all. I laugh because I don't take it seriously. Alright. The strip, unfinished when cut folded, was reprinted and completed in Fleetway's 2018 spin-off titled Crisis. Alright, two plays staged at Oxygen House at Ensburn Fringe had scripts by Morrison. Red King Rising in 1989 concerned an imagined relationship between Lewis Carroll and Al. So, for those of you who don't know, Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland, was a man named Edward Dodson, I believe it's Edward Dodson. And yes, he wrote Alice in Wonderland for Alice Liddell and based the character of Alice Liddell off of her. What they're not going to mention here is that Dodson laid claim on Alice. Like, he looked at this tiny child and said, I am going to marry her when she becomes of age. And for any of you trying to argue, oh, it's Victorians. Victorians are just so weird. No, this was seen as weird-ass shit back in the Victorian era. And the only reason why I'm taken aback from this now is... in a couple of Grant Morrison graphic novels or series, there is some very weird pedophilia angles to it. Like, Sebastian O. I talked about that earlier. With Sebastian O, one of the side characters that Sebastian O comes across, who is one of his comrades, is a flat-out pedophile. And he openly keeps small boys within his mansion to do with what he wants. Which is a yuck. That is a yuck. And then you get into... what is that other title? The Mystery Plays, where the protagonist is pretending to be a detective, and it turns out, no, he is a child murderer, which... and so it's like, all of that with the imagined relationship between Lewis Carroll and Alice Liddell, it's like, why is there so much pedophilia in your work, dude? Anyways, the other depravity concerned the British occultist Aleister Crowley. The plays won between them a Fringe First Award, the Independent Theatre Award for 1989, and the Evening Standard Award for New Drama. Alright, 1990s. Well, Jesus Christ, Gothic. That also has some pedophilia implications into it. God damn it. Morrison returned to Batman with Gothic storyline in issues 6 through 10 of the Batman title Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, which it is a good series, but again, Jesus, dude. The early 1990s saw Morrison revamping Kid Eternity for DC with artist Duquesne Vigretto and Dan Dare with artist Ryan Hughes. Morrison colored Dare's Bright Future with the Thatcherism in Fleetway's Revolver. In 1991, Morrison wrote Bible John A. Forensic Meditation with Fleetway's Crisis based on an analysis of possible motivations for the crimes of the serial killer Bible John. Who is Bible John? Moniker given to an identified believe no murder of 3 young women. Okay. So he's basically Jack the Ripper. Okay. Covering similar themes to Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell's From Hell. The work utilized cut-up techniques, a Ouija board, and collage rather than conventional panels to tell the story, which, alright, sounds neato. In 1993, Morrison, fellow Glaswegian comic... Wait, Mark Millar is from Glasgow? He's Scottish too? What? What? I thought he was English. Okay. And John Smith were asked to revigorate 2000 AD with an 8-week run called The Summer Offensive. Morrison wrote Judge Dredd and Really and Truly, and co-wrote the controversial Big Dave with Millar. DC Comics launched its Vertigo imprint in 1983, published several of Morrison's creator-owned projects such as steampunk miniseries Sebastian O, and a graphic novel The Mystery Play, which I mentioned earlier. 1995 saw the release of Kill Your Boyfriend, which... a very strange book with artist Philip Bond, originally published as a Vertigo Voices one-shot. In 1996, Morrison wrote Flex Mentallo, a Doom Patrol spin-off with art by Frank Quitely. It is a very good book. Like, that is a very good book. And returned briefly to DC Universe Superheroics with short-lived Aztec, co-written with Mark Millar. In 1996, Morrison was given the Justice League of America to revamp as JLA, a comic book that gathered the Big Seven superheroes of the DC Universe into one team. This run was hugely popular and returned the title to best-selling status. Oh, jeez. It is only 5 p.m. Morrison wrote several issues of The Flash with Mark Millar, as well as DC's crossover event in 1998, the 4-issue miniseries DC 1 Million, in addition to plotting many of multiple crossovers. With the 3 volumes of the creator-owned The Invisibles, Morrison started their largest and possibly most important work. The Invisibles combined political, pop, and subculture references. The Invisibles are... Now I get into 1990 film. The Matrix has numerous elements which would have been attributed by critics to the influence of Morrison's The Invisibles. Morrison was immediately struck by the similarities in their own work upon seeing the film, and from what I understand, while Morrison was like, oh my god, this is my work, he was also like, whatever. What you gonna do? Like, really, what you gonna do? Alright, the 2000s. In 2000, Morrison's graphic novel JLA Earth 2 was released with art by Frank Quitely. It was Morrison's last mainstream work for DC for a while as they moved to Marvel Comics. While at Marvel, Morrison wrote the 6-part Marvel Boy series. I have heard a lot about that, but I've never read it. And Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4. I have read that, and I liked it, but I get the feeling that Fantastic Four fans would absolutely not enjoy it. Their take on another major superhero team. In July 2001, they began writing the main X-Men title, renamed New X-Men for their run, with Quitely providing much of the art. Again, Morrison's revamping of a major superhero team provided a commercial success. 2002, Morrison launched their next creator-owned project at Vertigo, The Filth, drawn by Chris Weston and Gary Erikine. 13-issue miniseries, which I've heard is bizarre in its own way. Same year, Morrison sold the screenplay to Sleepless Nights to DreamWorks, with Guillermo del Toro attached to direct. Around the same time, Morrison was working on a script for a sequel to Marvel Boy miniseries, but the project ultimately failed to materialize. In 2004, in 2004, Vertigo published 3 Morrison miniseries: Sea Guy, We 3, and Venorama. I've only read We 3 out of the 3 of those, and it basically is vegan propaganda. Morrison returned to JLA with the first story in a new anthology, JLA Classified. I'm gonna take a minute to set something on fire. I am going to let you guys know that I have been drinking earlier today, but I feel that it would be appropriate for this episode, considering that the subject we are currently speaking about has been known to experiment with a shit ton of drugs. So if any of you want to come at me for being a little buzzed, then you are hypocrites, because we are discussing a guy who got blitzed on acid and claimed he was abducted by aliens in Kathmandu. So, there you go. Alright. In 2005, Morrison wrote 7 Soldiers, which featured the Manhattan Guardian, Mr. Miracle, Clarion the Witch Boy, Bulleteer, Frankenstein, Zatanna, and The Shining Knight. The series consists of several interlinked 4-issue miniseries with 2 bookend volumes, 30 issues in all. Dan DiDio, the editorial vice president of... he was brought on to do New 52 and Crisis and Final Crisis too. Starting in November 2005, DC published All-Star Superman, a 12-issue story arc by Morrison and Frank Quitely. Not so much a revamp or reboot of Superman, the series presents an out-of-continuity iconic Superman for new readers. It's basically a love letter to Superman. It is... basically, Superman gets hit with a shit ton of energy, and he's dying. He is like a star that grows brighter and brighter when it dies until it explodes in fantastic fashion. So that's basically the story of All-Star Superman. But it also has him tying up loose ends and And not acknowledging. I guess acknowledging like the classic Superman stories. Yeah. Alright, one Eisner. Smear. Worked on Pup. Star of Robin Williams album, Intensive Care. Morrison presided. Outline, story, and script work for 2 video games, Battlestar Galactica and Predator Concrete Jungle. Oh, I did not know that. 2006, New Line Cinema optioned We 3 as a film project. Following year for adaptation, Area 51. Alright, 2006, Morrison was voted as number 2 favorite comic book writer of all time. 2007, San Diego Comic-Con, DC announced Morrison would write Final Crisis. 2008, New York Comic-Con, Morrison announced they would be working on Virgin Comics to produce webisodes. Alright. 2010s, or 2010s, Batman number 700 saw the return of Morrison to the title and a collaboration with an art team that consisted of Tony Daniel, Frank Quitely, Andy Cooper, and David Finch. Separate stories tied. Alright. Morrison returned to creator-owned work in 2010 with the 8-issue Vertigo miniseries Joe the Barbarian. Oh yeah, I've heard of that. With Sean Murphy. Yeah, I have heard of that one. Originally a 6-issue miniseries, Morrison felt that the story would benefit were an extra 2 issues. Titular Joe, a diabetic young boy who begins to hallucinate a fantasy world populated with his toys and other fantasy characters when he stops taking his medication. Following closure of Virgin Comics, Dynamite and Liquid Comics announced a partnership to publish a hardcover of illustrated scripts of Morrison and Mahabharata-based animation projects of 18 days with illustrations by artist Musket Singh, and was released in August 2010. They are the subject of a feature-length documentary titled Grant Morrison Talking with Gods, which we may or may not get to. Boneyard, Action Comics, Rex Morales, Super Gods, Second Image Project. Morrison's Multiversity Project for DC published in 2014-2015, a miniseries of 9 one-shots set in the New 52 worlds in the DC multiverse. It included the main Multiversity title, which involves the return of President Calvin Ellis, the Black Superman of Earth 23, originally seen in Action Comics, Volume 2, Number 9, which was framed for the whole series. Alright, 2016, became editor-in-chief of comics anthology Heavy Metal. 2017, Morrison co-created the sci-fi series Happy, which starred Christopher Maloney and Patton Oswalt. 2018, Morrison and artist Liam Sharp launched the new Green Lantern comic entitled The Green Lantern for DC Comics. Alright. Alright, so Morrison Green Lantern series began in 2020. Morrison co-created and worked as a writer and producer of the 2020 series Brave New World for the Peacock streaming service. 2021, it was announced that new comic called Proctor Valley Road would be released, developed by Morrison in partnership with NBC Universal and NBC Universal's UPC. Marvel 2021. Morrison will write a 4-issue series entitled Superman and the Authority. Alright, personal life. This is where we get a little bit interesting. In a 2011 interview, Morrison stated that they and their wife Kristen had no children, and when asked if they regretted this, Morrison replied, "Slightly, but I don't know. Every time I think of it, I think of the reality of it. I really like kids, and I get on with them, and it's an aspect of it, and it's that aspect of it. But I see people with actual kids." Hold on. I like kids, and I get on with them, and it's that aspect of it. But I see people with actual kids. I feel like that quote got butchered. The trauma and the trouble. And if I'm worried that my cat is sick, it's the very thought of every day worrying about a kid would be even more hellish, which, okay, I guess I get. Morrison uses singular they pronouns. 2020 interview. I got chewed out for this, by the way. I did a review of, I believe, Sebastian O and the mystery play, and when I used he pronouns, I got chewed out in the comments in Reddit saying, "Why aren't you using they them pronouns?" And it's like, for fuck's sake, I didn't know. Like, I genuinely did not know he was doing that. But anyway. Morrison mentioned that they have been non-binary, cross-dressing, genderqueer from ages 10 years old. Yeah, he's a weird dude. Alright, so this is just how queer he is. Grant Morrison's first appearance as a comic character, and the cameo of Animal Man at number 11 and 14. They made a full appearance at the end of issue number 25 in 1990. Yeah, he was the original insert myself into the comic book to fix all the problems of the comic book character. That is a thing in his work. Alright, they were depicted in issues Simpsons comics, Morrison's 2005-2006 Summer Soldiers. Morrison appeared as the renegade member of 8 reality engineers and transforms into the Silver Age character Zor. Miniseries Tales of the Unexpected. Morrison, along with 52 comics writer Jeff Johns, Greg Rucka, and Mark Waid. Dorian Cooks, DC The New Frontier. Morrison was the physical model for Captain Cold. That's hilarious. Support appeared as himself in the 9th episode of Thor Season of Titans. He also appeared in a music video for My Chemical Romance. It was Na 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 Na. That was his appearance in the music video. Alright. So we've gone over his career, and if you would like to know what Grant Morrison was like in the peak of his career, let me give you a taste of it.
Here we are! Right!
Yes, that is how we decided to open that.
Fuck, man. I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I read Robert Anton Wilson and all this shit, and here we are, we're standing here, we're talking about this shit, and it's real. Okay, I'm pissed, and in half an hour I'm going to come up on drugs, so watch for it.
We're not going to watch this entire thing, but if you do watch this entire thing, it is very obvious he is on something.
I guess, I don't know, is there any practicing magicians in the audience? Put your hand up if we got any. Yeah, come on, bold! A few. Okay, by the time we finish this, you're all going to be practicing magicians. This shit's easy, right? I'm like you. Basically, why are we here, right? Why are we here at this thing? What's this all about? And by the way, this is a Scottish accent. So, reset the filters and pretend it's Sean Connery talking to you, okay? 007. Right. So if you can follow me, I'm just going to talk the way I talk, and fuck you if you don't understand me.
What year was this? I believe it was somewhere in the 2000s. Alright, so this was uploaded in 2018. When was this thing? Anyway, we'll go back up here.
The deal is this. I've been writing this comic for the last 6 years, and the weird thing was, like you, like everyone here, we're trying to figure what's going on. Why do we feel different? Why don't we fit into this world? Why do we think that they're not telling us the truth? So I went out and I read Robert Anton Wilson's books when I was 20 years old, which is 20 years ago now. And I figured, is this guy bullshitting me? He says we can talk to aliens, we can talk to people from Sirius. Is he talking crap? He said Aleister Crowley's got methods for contacting alien intelligence and for changing the world. Is he talking crap? So I did it. And no, he's not talking crap. Right? And we can all do it. And this is by way of trying to demolish the counterculture and replace it with something useful. We're just going to start here and see where we get to. When I started doing The Invisibles, which is a comic book for people who haven't seen the thing, it's a comic book which is kind of my attempt to explain what happened to me after I'd been abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994. And the only reason I was abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994 is because I went to Kathmandu in 1994 to be abducted by aliens.
I think that is a very good summary of Grant Morrison's outlook, and I believe with that short clip I have proven my case that Grant Morrison is comic book's favorite nut job. Like, he is a nut. He is very much a nut in several different ways. So, with that, I'm not gonna go through the entire talk. I have tried to listen to this talk myself, and I only understood about like 50% about what he was saying, to be perfectly honest. Like he said at the very beginning, he was pissed and he was coming down from drugs, so I don't even know if he knew what he was saying in that speech half the time. So that's what I say to myself to comfort myself. So we're not going to watch this entire thing. I will link it down below, but we're not going to watch this entire thing. But anyway, let's go into a few other videos. What's this one? I forget what this one. Marvel Entertainment. Hickman talk about X-Men. Do we want to do that? Alright, and then we have... Yeah, Alan Moore and Grant Morrison do have a very, very, very funny feud about who's the best wizard, which is very funny. Here we also have early works of Grant Morrison. Oh, that's just general search. And we also have Thinking Critical. You know what? Give me a few minutes. I'm going to go get myself another beer, and I'll be right back. Alright, let's get to Thinking Critical, and apparently Grant Morrison is coming back and he's gonna write Batman again. Apparently. We shall see more of this.
DC Comics are on a bit of a roll these days, and it sounds like a comic book legend is returning to the fold to a character he's very, very familiar with. Grant Morrison is returning to DC Comics to write a new Batman story. There's a lot of speculation out there. I believe I know the one that he's doing, but I don't know for 100%, so I'll save that for the very end. But obviously, Grant Morrison is very familiar to DC Comics fans. Me personally, he's more of a hit and miss kind of guy. When he gets it, he tends to do pretty awesome. I'm talking about JLA. I'm talking about his Animal Man, Doom Patrol stuff. Although Animal Man is really, really strange. I really like his Batman and Robin run. All-Star Superman, cannot forget that one at all. But he also...
That's another thing that Wes is pointing out here, is Grant Morrison is very much a you like him or you don't kind of guy. And he is very... the quality of his work is very hit or miss, because a lot of the times when he's going in more for like goofier storylines and you're not supposed to take it very seriously, he is a very good writer. However, when it comes to like creating new continuity and creating more like concrete stories, that's where things get a little weird. But anyway.
Also has a lot of misses out there. I'm not a particularly big fan of his Batman run in general until it becomes Batman and Robin. His most
The whole Talia rapes Batman to make Damian thing, but go on.
recent Superman and the Authority was atrocious. Thankfully, Philip Kennedy Johnson was able to salvage that and actually make something good out of it. I thought his Green Lantern run, as a Green Lantern fan, that one was definitely not for me. And I do think that his Action Comics that he did for the New 52 was also particularly bad. So he's just kind of one of those writers. Either he nails it or he misses it by a mile. But having Grant Morrison return to DC Comics and write Batman cannot be a bad thing, because he officially announced his return, marking a significant comeback to the Batman franchise after more than a decade. In a recent appearance on the Comic Book Couples Counseling podcast, Morrison revealed that his next...
Wait, what? Couples counseling? What? That sounds like a very strange concept for a podcast.
project is a Batman-related endeavor. He stated, "I don't need to do these things anymore. I only do it if it's something interesting. It's not Superman, but it's a Batman thing." This announcement has generated considerable excitement among fans eager to see Morrison's unique storytelling approach applied once again to The Dark Knight. And I'm certain that there are lots of people whose definitive version of Batman is Grant Morrison's. I personally am not one of those, but it's good to see a legend return. And Batman's actually in pretty good shape, because you got Absolute Batman, basically the #1 book right now from Scott Snyder. We're about to get a new Batman writer in Matt Fraction. Hopefully he can do something. But Batman and Robin right now from Philip Kennedy Johnson is really good. We've also got Detective Comics, although that's kind of trending downwards. But Grant Morrison on the 5th most important Batman book, you could certainly do far worse than that. And it sounds like he's going to be coming back for a big project. I think the first time in like maybe 15 years since he's really been writing Batman.
Wait, has it been 15 years? Oh shit, it has been 15 years. It's 2025. Oh my fuck.
So I think a lot of people will be pretty excited about that one. Me personally, I'm going to read it. I'm going to check it out. But after reading enough of his Green Lantern and that Superman and the Authority, if it doesn't tickle my fancy, essentially in the first 2 issues, I'll probably just jettison out of there, because it's probably not going to be worth my time. But I think many more people will probably have a more open mind about this.
Meeting fatigue?
Yeah, fuck you. Alright, I think that's enough of the announcement there with Wes. Let's move on to, this is a channel I've been wanting to showcase on this, these streams for a while, Strange Brain Parts. He is a very good YouTuber about comic books. But we're going to look into the early works of Grant Morrison.
Hello and welcome. Grant Morrison is an interesting creator, one who has developed an equally interesting body of work. If one had to characterize his style, it might be best to describe it as pure creative expressionism. It is a style that projects a noticeable level of enthusiasm for the material being created. The end result might not be perfectly executed, or, for that matter, coherent. But, more often than not, the work is a creative journey through concepts, rather than plot beats. So one can usually expect a high level of ambiguity in his work.
Yeah, that's the thing about Grant Morrison that a lot of people either love or hate. He is very much a concept guy. He is not a plot guy. He's a concept guy. And if you love concept literature, then you're going to love Grant Morrison. But if you're more of like a hard plot guy, and you're more of like by the logic, by the facts guy, you're probably going to hate Grant Morrison. No. No! Go away! Go away!
depending on one's perspective and taste preference. This approach is either unsatisfying on a story level, or it's interesting because it asks the reader to engage in the story on an intellectual level. Of course, this is a generalization. Morrison's work on JLA, for example, is plot-based storytelling, while on the other end of the spectrum, Flex Mentalo is more conceptual and esoteric. Everything else falls somewhere between these two extremes. With that said, let's look at the early, mostly obscure work of Grant Morrison. The second issue of the British comic anthology, Near Myths, contains the first published work of Grant Morrison. This story, Time is a Four-Letter Word, was written and illustrated by Morrison. Presumably, he also lettered it and inked it as well.
Yeah, that was Grant Morrison's early work. Well, he's not half bad as an artist, I will say.
To be perfectly honest, this 5-page story is practically incomprehensible. There are 2 or 3 stories going on concurrently, and somehow this all leads to a presumably catastrophic event. It is rather confusing, and I cannot say with any confidence that I understood what the point of the story was, or for that matter, what happened in the story itself. The next story, The Vatican Conspiracy, in Near Myths number 3, is marginally better. This story concludes in the following issue with the chapters Prelude to Ragnarok and The Fenris Factor. Possibly the most notable aspect about this story is the fact that the lead character, Gideon Stargrave, would go on to be used as one of King Mob's cover personalities in The Invisibles. Otherwise, it's a mashup of 60s dandy culture, science fiction, and occultism.
Something really funny, it's a funny conversation I've had with my boyfriend Tom. He apparently has heard of The Invisibles and is curious to get into The Invisibles. I'm not saying he shouldn't get into it, but let me put it this way. My boyfriend is into, like, Conan the Barbarian. He's into Arthurian stuff right now. He's more into, like, more solid plot-driven stories. And from the little bit I have read of The Invisibles, The Invisibles is kind of a hot mess in and of itself, and I get the feeling my boyfriend would appreciate some aspects of The Invisibles, but I also feel like he is going to absolutely be frustrated by The Invisibles. He's gonna get halfway into it and be like, okay, where the fuck is this story going?
It is a slightly interesting, light-hearted adventure. However, the story is noticeably disjointed in places, and it is preoccupied with establishing Stargrave as a hardcore badass. That being said, Morrison's abilities in both artwork
Did he say I get the coconut? Okay.
and writing do develop in these very early installments. Furthermore, the rudimentary elements of what Morrison would utilize throughout his career are rather pronounced, these elements being the aforementioned mix of esoteric occultism and science fiction. Around this time between 1979 and 1982, Morrison would also write and draw a newspaper strip called Captain Clyde, most of which is available on.
Again, he wasn't a half-bad artist. Like, he's not fantastic, but he wasn't bad. I feel like if he practiced a little bit more and honed in his skill a little bit more as an artist, it would have improved. But yeah, starting point, not a bad artist.
Online, but the reproduction of it is of a quality that is basically unreadable. For those interested, I've included a link to the material in the description below this video. Following the early death of the Near Myths anthology, Morrison would write a good handful of tales for Starblazer. This bi-weekly comic book was subtitled Space Fiction Adventure in Pictures. These are lowbrow boys' adventure stories that wouldn't challenge anyone above the age of 4. However, Morrison can't be criticized for this content. This rudimentary content was obviously a choice made by the publisher and the editorial staff.
And honestly, when it comes to being a starting writer and you're trying to find gigs, I personally don't judge too much when you're going. Oh, feeding time! The cats are getting their food. But anyway, yeah, I don't really judge artists or writers very much with what gigs they produce, unless it's something like hardcore bestiality porn or something like that. And the reason I don't is because, look, it's hard getting your foot in the door. It is very hard to get noticed. So sometimes it's like you gotta take shit gigs just to take the shit gig and hope that someone will see the gold you produced among the shit. It is a very hard gig. It's a very hard career.
This work is, clearly, Morrison collecting a paycheck, which, we all gotta do to pay the rent. So this material gets a hard pass from any criticism. It's something I would only suggest as a curiosity to those who are die-hard Morrison collectors. Otherwise, it is tedious in its simplicity. Abraxas was a science fiction epic that Morrison began, but never completed, for the comic book Sunrise. In fact, this was a project Morrison had originally proposed as a 100-page graphic novel to be serialized in Near Myths, before that comic suspended publication. Once again, this ambitious project would never get anywhere near completion. Sunrise would only last for 2 issues, and only 16 pages of the Abraxas story would be printed, all of which was prologue to the story Morrison was trying to get to. What's somewhat interesting is that the first part of the prologue is quite simplistic, much like his Star Blazer work, while the second part is more complex and distinctive. Presumably, the first part was written and illustrated during the Near Myths period, while the second part was written and drawn some years later. It's an interesting clash of style, or skill, I suppose. All of the aforementioned work is proto-Morrison. In my opinion, if one read it without knowing it was Grant Morrison, it would probably be quickly dismissed as uninteresting. That may sound a tad harsh, but it is rather rough material. To use a terrible metaphor, this early work is
We're all shit at the beginning, so how bad do you want to judge it? Those productions? Like, we're all shit at the beginning, so.
Morrison as a street musician. He picked up a guitar, learned a few chords and a melody, then he went to a street corner and practiced his craft in public. That being said, there is a progression of skill and a confidence that develops over time. So while it is rough, a creator begins to emerge through the material. Morrison's first high-profile credit, if one disregards the prior evolving material, is Warrior number 26. Unfortunately, this was the final issue of the anthology that first printed Marvel Man and V for Vendetta.
Aww.
The Morrison story, Liberator's Night Moves, goes nowhere due to Warrior going out of business. Like most British writers, especially those establishing themselves, Grant Morrison wrote a pile of Tharg's Future Shocks for the anthology comic book 2000 AD. For those who are unfamiliar with Future Shocks, these are very short stories, usually no longer than 5 pages, that are science fiction based and have a shocking or surprising end. According to many, writing Future Shocks got you in the door to this popular anthology. 2000 AD was, after all, the home of Judge Dredd, so it had a level of well-deserved prestige. Furthermore, producing Future Shock's material proved he had the skill and talent to tell a consistent story. Morrison's Future Shock stories are rather tight and polished. I mean, they would have to be in order to be published in 2000 AD. In comparison to his prior early work, it is a leap in style and quality for this creator. During this period, Morrison would provide work for another distinctly British property, Doctor Who. He would also do some work for Marvel UK. He wrote the Zoids portion of the comic book Spider-Man and Zoids, and he wrote a 5-page origin story for Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, in Action Force number 17.
I think that might be an offshoot of G.I. Joe. I'm looking at it from the font.
Which is rather solid work. Nothing outstanding, but solid professional credits nonetheless. Zoids, by the way, was a licensed comic based on a Japanese toy. Yeah, I know I've never heard of this toy either, but apparently this was a rather popular property in the country of its origin.
Franklin University makes it possible. Time has come, make a break from historical.
Serendipity intervenes at this point in Grant Morrison's career. In 1987, 2000 AD decided to experiment with superhero content. This was a genre that British comics generally didn't represent. Presumably, Alan Moore's success with the Marvel Man character inspired the editors of the anthology to expand their content to include this genre. Regardless, at this point, Grant Morrison had, as he has stated in interviews, done enough Future Shocks that he was next in line to get a continuing series with 2000 AD. When asked to propose a superhero series, Morrison came up with Zenith. The Zenith story began in issue 536 of 2000 AD, and it would periodically run until issue number 806. There are 4 story arcs, or phases as they were called, that make up the overall story.
I do want to read Zenith at some point because it does look... It looks very 80s. It looks very of its time, but it also very looks like a lot of fun.
In the first phase, we are introduced to Robert McDowell, also known as Zenith. He is an arrogant, self-involved pop star who also happens to be one of only 4 known superheroes on the planet. Like most people in their early 20s, Zenith is more interested in having a good time than being a responsible person.
Yeah.
He also embodies a type of entitlement only those that are young seem to possess. As a character, Zenith is thoroughly unlikable. There are more than a few parallels between Grant Morrison and the character of Zenith. Morrison's original sketch for the character was based on himself. Furthermore,
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, I definitely see it.
in interviews from that time, Morrison is brash and a touch egotistical, with an edgy, noticeable punk attitude.
The real ending of Watchmen should simply have been that they all felt stupid and went home, but it all just turned into a very traditional comic story. No, I will heavily disagree with that, because the whole point of Watchmen, which is a point that a lot of people don't get about Watchmen, is that it is a very complicated story with complicated characters. They are different characters who have different motivations, personalities, and reasons why they became superheroes in the first place. So for them to all go home and feel like they're stupid is wrong, because clearly characters such as Rorschach or even Dr. Manhattan, they don't feel stupid. Like, first off, Rorschach was killed, but he still felt justified in his actions. And as far as Dr. Manhattan comes, it's not so much that he felt stupid, he just felt like he ascended beyond, like, human comprehension. He ascended beyond that. I think the only characters that you can argue went home feeling stupid was Night Owl and... Silk Spectre. Yep. The second Silk Spectre. Yep. Like, the only two you can argue actually felt stupid after that entire story are those two. And for very different reasons, to be very blunt. So, to water down Watchmen as they should all have gone home and felt stupid, that destroys the beauty of Watchmen, and it destroys the point of Watchmen, I feel. So, I'm not even a Watchmen expert, and I know this. So it's like, okay, dude, just shut the hell up.
Dude, this is not unlike the character he is writing. The point being, he appears to be writing himself as a superhero. Phase 1 also introduces the many-angled beings, who are fourth-dimensional beings that need to possess a superhero in order to manifest in the third dimension. A regular human body cannot withstand the strain of this possession. It's this early run of Zenith that brought Morrison to the attention of DC. They were, at the time, looking to hire more British talent for their comic book line.
Oh, yeah. Red Black Orchid. Have not read the Hellblazer series, and I have read Shade the Changing Man by Peter Milligan. I liked the first half of Shade the Changing Man. The second half just goes completely off the rails and frankly isn't as good as the first half.
As it was conceived and executed, Zenith wouldn't have looked out of place in a mainstream North American comic, especially in the late 80s, when superheroes were going through a period of experimentation with a more realistic approach to the genre. Zenith contains this new realism to a degree, but at the same time, it does have a flippant attitude towards the grim and gritty tone that was prevalent at the time. In a way, Zenith does feel like a commentary on that commercialized grim attitude. This is embodied by the lead character himself, who basically remains unaffected by the events that occur around him. Moreover, experience doesn't change his attitude. He doesn't lapse into a state of depression and brood over the violence of his existence, or what life would have been like if only he had known the love of his parents. Feeling ways about things and stuff is just boring. Zenith is what he is, and from his perspective, what he is pretty damn cool. He's a superhero pop star, after all. Phase 2.
Kind of sounds based, to be perfectly honest. Listening to this, it's like, hey, that actually sounds like a pretty cool dude.
2's basic story is one about a rich, slightly off-balance individual who wants to breed Zenith with a few female superheroes he's created. The end result being, of course, even more super beings. Of all the Zenith stories, this is the one where the character is most active. Moreover, his backstory is filled in a fair amount. It doesn't make him more likable, but one can at least identify with the emotional distance he consistently displays. Phase 3 is the pinnacle of the Zenith series. It involves a multi-dimensional war that isn't unlike Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Jesus, we cannot escape this series.
The multiverse is about to reach a state of alignment known as the Omnihedron, and if the proper conditions are met, the many-angled beings will be able to take control of the multiverse and shape it to their whims. Oddly enough, Zenith is barely present in the story. In a way, saving the multiverse is too much bother for him to deal with. What makes this phase particularly interesting is it establishes more than a few tropes that would be present in Morrison's work in the future, the Invisibles in particular, and to some degree Animal Man, which he had begun writing at the time. One such trope is that there are realities that exist beyond our ability to comprehend them. Another would be, in a generalized sense, multidimensional or cosmic forces that manufacture a crisis in order to seize control. One could also
Sounds like Morrison.
include a sense of helplessness by the protagonist, who is called to react to a situation they are not prepared to handle. These are large themes that usually have a lot of moving parts. Final Crisis, Multiversity, and Seven Soldiers of Victory, to name a few, embody the spirit of what Morrison did in Phase 3 of Zenith. While it sounds like he was merely repeating himself, all of these projects approach the theme from a different angle. The basic elements are similar, but the method is mostly unique. Finally, one could suggest that Phase 3 was where Morrison opened up his imagination tap to flow fully onto the page. Much like Jack Kirby did with The Fourth World, and like Morrison himself would continue to do from this point forward, he began to throw out ideas, concepts, and characters with a level of inherent ambiguity. By that I mean he gave the reader just enough information to ground the idea, concept, or character, and then
Oh god, this is the burlesque show in Flex Mentallo. Okay, not burlesque show, but this is like... Okay, this is the third issue of Flex Mentallo, and basically Flex Mentallo enters this sex club for superheroes. So that's what this scene is. It is a sex show, basically. And this is Grant Morrison basically confronting the idea that a lot of superhero antics are basically just fetishes.
he allowed the reader to engage in those elements on an intellectual level should the reader desire to participate in such activity. If one chooses otherwise, these undeveloped ideas and such are just nifty flavor text. The point being, during Phase 3, Morrison fully blossomed as the creator he's known to be in the present day. Phase 4 wraps up the dangling threads in the Zenith story. Basically, it's a war between the superheroes on Earth for the future of the planet. Once again, Zenith is somewhat incidental to the story. It's almost as if he's there by accident. That being said, as a conclusion, it is quite well done. It also brings one to the natural end of Grant Morrison's early career. From that point forward, he had a fully developed voice and style, one that continues to present day. In my opinion, the early work of Grant Morrison culminates with Zenith. At this point, specifically at the end of Phase 3, Morrison has developed a confident, lean style. It's a style he would effectively use in both Animal Man and Doom Patrol. This lean
And Doom Patrol is very weird too. Just a warning.
style would also be present in other contemporary British works, such as St. Swithin's Day and The New Adventures of Hitler.
That will never not be funny to me, so forgive me.
Overall, Grant Morrison is an example of a creator that embodies the most important aspect of the creative journey. He sat down and he did the work. He did a lot of work, a fair amount of which was quite unremarkable. But the quality is somewhat secondary to the process of simply producing a tangible product for an audience.
Well, I would also argue as a writer that a lot of the early work you produce, it is incidental. And it's not because, oh, you were just too shitty. It's just, no, you're just finding yourself as a writer. And a lot of your early stages are just you getting your foothold in, trying to figure out, okay, sorry, I have the hiccups. I don't have the drunk hiccups, I have the hiccups. But a lot of it is just finding your footing of, okay, what do I want to create? And am I good at creating what I want to create? That is the early stages of being a writer. And you can bitch about it all you want, but that's what it is. That's what your early stages are like as a writer. So that's why I'm not too hard on people with their like first work or like their indie work, just because it's like, okay, you're still ironing out your kinks. So it's like, I'm not too judgmental. Once you get into professional work, then I am going to judge the fuck out of you. And if you have not ironed out your kinks by the time you get into professional work, I am going to not only judge you, but judging the person who uplifted you in the first place when you clearly should not have been in the position that you are in.
Having a great idea is absolutely meaningless unless it's on a page. Moreover, holding that great idea in your head until it's fully developed might be getting in the way of the next great idea waiting to emerge. Ultimately, this is what makes Grant Morrison an interesting creator. No idea or concept is so precious that he holds it back until it's fully, perfectly developed. All his darlings either thrive or die right on the comic book page. That's it for today. Like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I will talk at you later. Until next time.
Alright, so we got done with that. Let's see, should we do the feud? Should we do him? Actually, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to do Grant Morrison, Wisecrack. Wisecrack has a very good video about Grant Morrison. Alright, here we are. How we become God. I do recommend this video for you to watch. I'm going to pause several times throughout this video, but yeah, I recommend this video for Grant Morrison.
Just get good, bro. Just get good. I gamed like I had plus 50 toughness, but really, I'm plus 100 afraid.
Hey, life can be scary, but State Farm supports you.
I feel plus 250 relieved.
Okay, there's that guy is like aging way more
This
than he
video is
should.
sponsored by...
Like the State Farm guy, it looks like he's aging way faster than previous State Farm. I don't know, heads. I am blanking on the word right now. Okay, let's forget about that. Let's get to the video.
Hymns. What's up, Wisecrack? Jared again. We saw your request, so today we're putting the crazy hat back on to dive into the philosophy of Grant Morrison, writer of such acclaimed works as All-Star Superman, Flex Mentallo, and Multiversity. Like Alan Moore, Grant Morrison was part of the British invasion that revolutionized comics in the 80s. And also like Moore, he's a self-proclaimed magician with an affinity for psychotropic drugs.
To me, it just comes down to a very simple equation, is that life plus significance equals magic.
But there
Again, that's Morrison for you! I don't want any of you after this stream to criticize me for calling him a nut when he is very much a nut.
There are major differences between them, beyond their obvious discrepancy in haircut philosophy. As insane as Moore seems, Morrison might be even crazier. He wrote some fictional girlfriends for a fictional version of himself in The Invisibles, and then later claimed that they appeared in real life.
So as a result of all this, I just split up with my girlfriend, and I said, okay, I want a new one, and I want it to look exactly like this chick in the comic, because she's cool, you know. So I did a sigil. A month later, the girl turns up. Then another one.
And when he wrote about this fictional Grant Morrison being attacked by bacterial gods, a demonic attack and or staph infection brought real-life Grant Morrison to death's doorstep.
I found that if I put the character through a situation where he was being tortured, where his lungs had burst and he was being held in captivity and subjected to all these awful things, 3 months later I'm in hospital, 2 burst lungs, dying of blood poisoning and facing exactly the same shamanic trial that I put my character through.
Then Christ appeared to him, after which he was healed and gained the superpower to cure cancer in cats. But all of that pales in comparison to his experience in Kathmandu.
I'd been abducted by aliens in Kathmandu in 1994.
Where he was abducted by rippling, dripping blobs of pure holographic metamaterial angels and brought to a mega medium in which entire universes are suspended and shown the nature of reality. Allegedly.
We need to make allegedly bigger, bolder, and in like a slightly more alarming shade of red, because oh my god, I do like a lot of Grant Morrison works, but it is also just very hard to defend him as a professional writer, because it's like, I love him and the shit he does, but it's like, Jesus Christ, dude, can you please just stop being a weirdo for 5 fucking minutes?
It was like a burrito of religious revelation and alien abduction all rolled into one. Whether he actually ascended to a heavenly hyperspace or was just tripping balls is beside the point.
Tripping balls. I'm going with tripping balls. I don't care what anybody says, he was tripping balls.
There's a surprising amount of sober-minded philosophy and physics that seem to agree with certain aspects of Morrison's Kathmandu experience, including why he believes that the universe is essentially just a giant comic book, and how he's the midwife to an incredible future wherein we become God. Welcome to this Wisecrack edition on the philosophy of Grant Morrison. Spoilers ahead, and if you want to dive even deeper into the mind of this mad genius, join us over at wisecrackplus.com for an hour-long podcast interview with the creators of this video. To be clear, Morrison is not suggesting we could ever become the capital G God described in the Bible, Torah, or the Quran. You know, a
So the Abrahamic God. Got it.
single almighty creator of all things. When comic writers use the word God, it's more often with a lowercase g, like the Norse deity turned Marvel hero Thor, or other immensely powerful beings. With this logic, Morrison regards the Justice League as the pantheon of American mythology, and deliberately structured his roster in JLA to parallel their Olympian counterparts. Now, we want to be very specific in saying that he doesn't merely mean humans will become superpowered post-humans one day. He means something much more. It's Captain Atom who, inspired Moore's Dr. Manhattan.
Inspire. Not inspire Dr. Manhattan. It's... Okay, so perhaps the Dr. Manhattan of comic books inspired Dr. Manhattan, but this version of Atom is definitely inspired by Dr. Manhattan, so yeah, no. It's like a chicken and egg situation with these two.
That gives us our first hint as to what Morrison means by God. Both Captain Atom and Dr. Manhattan achieve God status because of their view of time. They experience every event in their lives simultaneously. It's not that they have perfect recall of the past and total knowledge of the future. For them, there is no past or future. Instead, every single moment is equally eternally real. Picture a film reel. As it rolls forward at 24 frames per second, the light projects one image on the screen at any given moment. In this analogy, the screen is reality, and only that single frame is real. A frame pops into existence as the projector illuminates it, and pops out of existence as we move on to the next frame. This is what philosopher J.M.E. McTaggart calls the A theory of time.
Okay, for context, it's like, you kind of do and kind of don't need to know all of this for understanding Grant Morrison's writing. It's like you do and you don't.
It's how we as humans perceive time. McTaggart's B theory, on the other hand, is that events do not have objective tense. So imagine if we were to illuminate each frame of the film reel all at once, so that we could simultaneously gaze upon every single moment in the movie. The main school of thought among B theorists is eternalism, which claims every moment in time is eternal, from the Big Bang to the heat death of the universe.
No. I do not subscribe to that at all. Time's arrow marches forward no matter what, and all things come to an end no matter what. There is no such thing as eternalism.
Nothing ever pops in or out of existence. Rather, events exist alongside one another. The shattering of this illusion is a frequent trope in Morrison's writings. In The Invisibles, Lord Fanny's initiation into magic is accomplished at the age of 11, when the remainder of Fanny's life, getting raped and beaten in Rio, drugged out in a drag club in London, even eventually dying, is experienced as if it already happened. The Aztec goddess Tlazolteotl reveals to Fanny, time is not a river. Time is more like a...
By the way, when it comes to British slang, Fanny means vagina. So he's Lord Vagina.
bubble, but is to a bubble what a bubble is to a circle drawn on the ground. So Morrison philosophizes about the nature of time in his stories. Cool, right? Well, he takes it further, way further. To Morrison, a slightly more literal version of this B theory of time lies in the very medium of the comic book. On any given page, if we were to ask the heroes, they'd tell us that page and that panel was the present moment, so far as they could tell. But as the reader, we see that all the panels, all the pages, all the printed issues are all equally now. Their time is an illusion, but one to which we're not subjected. Even the two-dimensional flat piece of paper on which comics are drawn may be an apt analog for the structure of space-time. Per Morrison, our universe may even all be a hologram projected onto a flat mega-membrane, which is, in turn, embedded along with many others like it within a higher dimensional space.
I'm sure if I was on acid, I would totally be vibing with this right now.
Oh, gnarly!
He's referring, in his own way, to the holographic principle. Per Stephen Hawking, information associated with all phenomena in the three-dimensional world can be stored on a two-dimensional boundary, like a holographic image. In a certain sense, the world would be two-dimensional, like the pages of a comic book. So far, everything Morrison said seems like a reasonable conclusion to draw from mainstream theoretical physics. And if all he had to say was that just as a film reel is a fitting analogy for A theory, so too is a comic book an apt analogy for the B theory of time, his contribution would be entirely warranted. But then the Kathmandu experience went down.
But then Kathmandu.
And things got weird. Now, although his more out there ideas don't necessarily hold up to scientific scrutiny, they're still worth—
You don't say! You don't say! Like, oh, I do love this guy's writing, but holy crap, is he a nut job?
exploring because they take comic books and superhero stories and turn them into a compelling worldview. Whether warranted or not, many look to figures like Superman and Captain America for moral inspiration. Morrison offers some justification for emulating fictional heroes, treating them as gods, and even goes so far as to say that the idea of Superman is every bit as real as the idea of God, and suggests that we are even more super, even more godlike. It's for this reason that Morrison depicts philosopher Giovanni Pico della Mirandola in the pages of All-Star Superman delivering his famous oration on the dignity of man. As he later said in his autobiography, Pico's oratorio is without a doubt urging us to go far beyond the human, into the realm of angels and God.
We will never do that. We will never do that. Like, maybe it's okay, I've watched this video years before, and now I'm watching it at 30 years old, and I'm looking at that statement, and I'm just thinking, we will never do that. I was actually just yesterday where someone said to me something to the effect of, oh, well, I guess we can all figure this out if we all just get along. Like, why can't we just learn from our lessons? And it's like, and I said straight up, we will never do that because we are human. it's people like Grant Morrison that I admire his work, but I don't want to interview him or have a discussion with him because I am probably gonna want to punch him in the face a little bit, because humans are humans. We are still human no matter what, and there is no ascending beyond humanism for us because we are human. So with this philosophy, it's like humans are capable of great good. Don't get me wrong, we are capable of great good. However, that's not all humans. It's because we have free will, and we have the freedom of will to decide, do I want to do the good thing or do I want to do the bad thing? Like, we have that free will. So there is no trying to ascend beyond humanism because we are human. Our human nature keeps us in the place that we are, and we cannot ascend above it because we are human. So, yeah.
It asks us to accept the superhuman as an undeniable fact of our nature, and the goal of our future evolution as a people. Although his metaphors are biblical, suggesting cherubs and seraphs and thrones as our role models and intermediaries on the road to God or cosmic consciousness, we can just as easily call them superheroes. So what happened at Kathmandu that made Morrison believe that the
drugs,
the universe really is a comic book and that humanity really is a superhero? Well, he claims to have stepped outside the multiverse and seen reality from the outside. The universe, the entire space-time continuum from Big Bang to heat death no less, was not a linear stream of events with beginning, middle, and end. That was only how it felt from the inside. All life on Earth was one thing, a single weird anemone-like mega hydra with its single-celled immortal root in pre-Cambrian tides, a slowly complexifying, increasingly self-aware superorganism. It was all of us, all life as seen from the perspective of a higher dimension. Whereas eternalism is content to conclude that space-time
I really have changed as an adult, because I'm listening to all this and I'm just thinking to myself, bullshit. I toyed with it as a younger person in my mid-20s, but I'm looking at it now like, this is some bullshit. Maybe it is just me. I don't know. It's very weird watching this video now.
Time is a timeless four-dimensional object, Morrison goes beyond eternalism by claiming that by the same principle, every human being is actually a mere cell in a single superorganism that is humanity.
That I can agree with. Like, a lot of nihilists love to believe life is meaningless, so let's just do whatever the hell we want and not contribute to society because it's all bullshit anyways. But when you think about it, society can only really function if we all come together and make it work. So we effectively are a cell inside of the body that is society. So I can agree on this principle, at least.
And therefore, if each one of us is part of a larger whole, then altruism and beneficence and charity are in our own self-interest. The simplistic divide of right and wrong and good and evil in superhero comics suddenly seems less silly because our morals
no, especially when it comes to the Joker. The Joker is 100% evil. What the fuck are you talking about?
Aren't arbitrary social constructs. They're the genetic programming instructing this superorganism not to destroy itself. Indeed, this view as a basis for ethics is the very conclusion Lex Luthor reaches when he gains Superman's powers, and upon seeing with his super senses all the fundamental forces and how they're interconnected, he begins to weep. This is how he sees all the time, every day, like it's all just us in here together, and we're all we've got. Okay, so if humanity as a whole is like a superhero comic book, we should therefore behave like these costume do-gooders. It's a compelling case, but if you think that's weird, he also saw fifth-dimensional aliens, or what he called mercurial hypersprites. Five-dimensional intelligence.
Hypersprites are there for the record. It's kind of like a Scottish myth of the sprites, where they're like little fire thingies that lures you off your path and whatever. You've seen them in Brave from Pixar. No. Go away. Go away.
Instances could, as a condition of their geometrically elevated position, get into our skulls quite easily, and we could expect their voices to come from inside. They, in turn, could hear our thoughts as easily as we can read Batman's private inner monologues on a 2D page. This is illustrated in Multiversity Pax Americana #1. While reading a comic book, Captain Atom muses to two scientists. The story's linear, but I can flip through the pages in any order, any direction, forward in time to the conclusion, back to the opening scene. The characters remain unaware of my scrutiny, but their thoughts are transparent, weightless in little clouds. This is how a two-dimensional continuum looks to you.
State Farm is there to support you. You can beat Bake Wars.
Time to unite the Muffinverse and take down the Crumb Crew. I gotta download a patch.
Noob.
Then, staring straight ahead, he says, "Imagine how your 3D world appears to me." Adam's fourth wall break brings us to another major theme in Morrison.
Oh yeah, that's the Simon and Siegel and Schuster design of Superman.
Works. Metafictionality, which is the exploration of the relationship between the fiction itself with the real world of the writer and reader. Morrison first wrestled with metafictionality in the final issue of his run on Animal Man, in which he donned what he calls a fiction suit. He inserts himself into the comic itself to interact with the character. He notes, "I explained to my character how the people who wrote his life needed drama and shock and violence to make his story interesting. The implication was that our own lives may be written to entertain or to instruct an audience in a perpendicular direction we could never point to, interacting with us in ways we could scarcely understand, but that could be divined in the relationship of the comic world to the world of the creator and audience." This is
For the record, I do see my characters as an aspect of me, but I do not believe they are real. They are not real. They are figments of my imagination.
the crux that connects Morrison's metafiction to his musings on space-time. If comic books reflect the nature of our universe, can we say that the physical comic-like universe reflects the nature of some higher reality? Who are our cosmic comic creators? Who writes the plot lines of history, pencils the particle interactions, letters the thought balloons of intelligent minds? Morrison's answer is the fifth-dimensional aliens that we can't grasp with our feeble three-dimensional minds. But he admits the particulars are less important than the implications that follow from their being intelligent designers. If the analogy of our universe being like a comic book extends so far as to suggest that it has something like a writer, then the mere fact that it is a written work implies a purposefulness to our existence. Now, of course, being created doesn't necessarily impart dignity. We might be like Morrison's Animal Man, with all our suffering for no greater purpose than to provide drama in a piece of cheap entertainment.
That's basically Christianity, yeah.
We might be made by a hack. Our whole purpose might be to pass butter. But contra his younger self when writing Animal Man, the more mature Morrison became more optimistic. In Flex Mentallo, Man of Muscle Mystery, Morrison once again used metafictionality as a means of exploring questions about our own purpose. Just as Morrison sees reality as having a three-tiered structure, with his fifth-dimensional imps at the top, the 2D comic book characters at the bottom, and us in the middle, so too is the story of Flex Mentallo set across three levels of reality. There's the cartoon world of Flex Mentallo.
Oh, there's where the fetish came from. Okay.
The realistic world of Flex's writer Wallace Sage, an avatar of Morrison himself, and yet a higher reality inhabited by superheroes more real than their writers, or the fifth-dimensional aliens. In the story, it's revealed that superheroes, instead of being merely a product of the imagination of writers like Wally, were in fact the beings that created Wally's entire world. after which they retreated into the imagination, seeding our culture with superhero stories in anticipation of the day that mere mortals are ready to become like them. As a result, humanity only needs to resolve their uncertainty about whether superheroes are real or not and decide to believe them into existence. Here Morrison is suggesting a much more dignified purpose to our existence. We're meant to discover our fundamental purpose in the pages of comic books, and to believe into existence the idea of the Superman, to incarnate.
It's both very nihilistic and optimistic at the same time, you know? Like, the nihilism of, yes, our fates are being written by an otherworldly being and we cannot change it, but there's also the optimism where the beings have so much faith in us and they want us to ascend to something greater than what we have been. So it's a weird mixture of nihilism and optimism.
Him in ourselves. For Morrison, the medium of comics and the plot structure of superhero stories are so closely connected in our culture because both are parts of the same pattern that explain everything else in existence. In recognizing this pattern, Morrison writes his own autobiography Super Gods in the style and structure of an archetypal superhero story, including a secret origin in Glasgow, the call to adventure atop Kathmandu, and a death and rebirth in which he brings the hidden knowledge he gained on his hero's journey to the comics community. And
I have no desire to read that book now.
while that hidden knowledge is parsed out in piecemeal in his comics writing, it's in Super Gods where he's most explicit about just what makes humankind itself a super god. Already we can see humankind as having all the attributes of comic book superheroes or even pagan gods. Whereas Mercury carried messages at the speed of thought to the Roman gods, we have instantaneous interconnectivity via the internet. Whereas Heimdall's all-seeing eye could spy everywhere in all 9 realms, our satellites can zoom in on any spot on Earth. Like Superman, we've flown faster than a speeding bullet. Humanity, when viewed as a whole, is already a super god. Insofar as there is no future frames of the film reel popping into existence, we are not becoming this super god, we already always are. This epic of human history is merely its secret origin story as to how it gets its superhuman powers, but all of its ongoing adventures and never-ending battles to come are all already written, published, printed, and on the shelves of some higher dimensional comic shop. If mankind is this superorganism with all these stupendous powers, who's supposed to act according to the simple morality of a superhero, whose whole history is structured like a superhero story, and who's living in a cosmos that's constructed like a comic book, then Morrison's obvious conclusion is this: mankind's purpose is to be a superhero. It's for this reason that
This does propose the very interesting question of were aliens really that interested in my storyline? Like, I'm looking back at my own life, and I'm just thinking to myself, my life is fucking boring compared to other, like, superheroes. So if we are going by the concept that fifth dimensional beings have written our own stories in comic books already, and so our story is already set out, my question is, who the hell is interested in reading my life story? Like, who? Who is interested in this? I mean, I like my life. It can be boring at some points, but I like my life. But my life is definitely not worthy of making a comic book out of it. And so I'm just, with this theory in mind, it's like, who the hell is, like, the adventures of Heather? Who is publishing this comic book? My life is boring, and I will admit that my life is boring. I am not a superhero in any sense of the word, so with that philosophy in mind, I feel like the only fifth dimensional beings that would be interested in my storyline are, like, grandmas who just want to read, like, cute little slice of life stories about the creatures of the third dimension. Because that's pretty much what my life is. So, yeah, that's the only conclusion I could get from that theory.
Morrison calls the sun god from Smallville our greatest ever idea as the human species, not because Superman was the prototype on which all other superheroes would be based, but because he is the template for which the super god of humanity must become, all powerful and all good, all at the same time. This is the summation of Morrison's philosophy, articulated best by Jor-El to his one and only son regarding the essential truth about man and Superman. And not the mankind within the comics, but the mankind reading comics. You have given them an idea.
Lost Girls. Oh, damn. That's another rabbit hole, but we are not going to get into that today.
Ideal to aspire to, embody their highest aspirations. They will race and stumble and fall and crawl and curse, and finally, they will join you in the sun, Kal-El. But hey, whether or not we accomplish wonders, the doctors who work with hymns have come pretty close. Hymns is—
Alright, that's a advertisement for the rest of it. So, I don't know, I feel like that's a very good summation of Grant Morrison, his writing, his works, and his ideologies. So, yeah, I think I'll call the stream there. If you liked the stream, please give it a like, put a comment down below, and share it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!